Kia ora, Rachel.
Oh, kia ora. One of the things that we always keep in mind is that online is different from face-to-face, and also it's not. We've worked recently on pedagogies of practice for online, and I think some of the key principles in our pedagogies of practice for teaching and learning are just as important for when we're learning together as teachers. So we've identified some key principles there about being connected, around the learner at the centre, and around emergence design. All of those things together support the foundational stuff we're trying to achieve, the outcomes that we're trying to achieve of engagement and participation. And we know engagement and participation are important. Our teachers talk about it all the time for their learners, and it was raised a number of occasions when you registered with us about getting your teachers engaged and participating in these spaces. Just to unpack them just a little bit more, and you'll have the link to this if you want to explore it a bit further. Things like social presence is getting that closer relationship with people, you know, that you're real, you're not an avatar, and you're a real person, and these are real relationships. And just connecting and being able to create those opportunities. Now, it depends on the dynamics of the group you're working with, how closely you can do this and how often you're working with them. But these are all things to keep in mind when you're designing your PLD. And you're designing to be inclusive of everybody who's participating, as well as being really aware of the diverse needs. And, you know, we're quite aware of that with asking you before you started how confident you felt or what you felt your experience was. And we know starting out there's quite a bit of a range of experience there. And ACO, of course, is just as important. We're all learning this together. And when Lucy and I were preparing this, we had lots of learnings just in that short time of running through things before we set things up with you. There's always something to learn. We know that not only does this environment enable flexibility and adaptiveness, but we still need structure, and as a different learning environment. So we need to be really mindful about how we adapt things for online. So that resource is a VLN resource created by members of the VLN community who support Kōtuitui, who have all the teachers who are, and most of the teachers who are teaching and learning online at the moment. Thanks, Lucy. So just an overview of the types of things we'll be looking at today. Some of it we might be teaching you how to suck eggs. And if you've got some tips that we haven't presented, we feel very happy for you to be able to also just chip in on the back channel on the chat there. But we will be having an opportunity to talk together as well during the session. So we're talking about technical considerations, of which we've covered some already. Things like what platforms, how we look on screen, managing our participants. We'll talk about planning our facilitation strategies, depending on who we're working with and the situations at the time, and how to follow up with sharing and recordings and feedback and things like that, with some time for some Q&A at the end. I'm aware that we don't have a lot of time, but we'll make the most of the time that we have. Thanks, Lucy.
And meeting, one of the things that we think is really important for this is making it interactive. And so what we'd like to find out about is a little bit about you as our audience, and we'd like to find out what web conferencing platforms you're mainly using. And so we're just going to quickly demonstrate with a very brief Zoom poll in just a moment. And it's going to come up on your screen, and this is one of these things that you can set up ahead of time in your system. It's changed a little bit now. It's changed even since the last time I used it. This was a poll that I was set up, and I had to go through, and I could save it ahead of time. I'm just going to launch it right now. It's anonymous, and you can just answer this one question. So it's what platforms you're mainly using. And I used to be able to share it real time, but now I think they don't want to, swing the answers. And I can see just about everyone's answered, 21 out of 23.
Hey, Lucy, it's quite interesting. I didn't get a choice. I can see the poll changing, so it's probably because I'm a host.
Oh,
Yeah.
it'll be because you're a co-host. They're assuming that co-hosts aren't going to participate in the poll.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm ending the poll now, assuming that everybody has, and I'm just sharing the results, and you can see on your screen that most people here were using Zoom as well. So it was definitely telling you how to suck eggs about making your system mute, etc. So my apologies, which is good to know. So the second point of this, and you can see, I can see that there's a couple of people using Google Meet and one using Microsoft Teams, and I'm not being rude, but my sympathies, because I'm finding that challenging to use myself, but it might just be that I'm getting familiar with it. And so, but everyone's using some form of online, which makes sense in this group. So stopping that sharing here, what we would love you to share in a moment, the next thing that we're going to ask you to share is the particular things that you think are good about it, but just hold fire. Don't share it until I say. So this is a technique of using the chat that we call waterfall. So we ask people to prepare their answer, get it all ready to go, but hold fire on pressing enter until I say the word. So once I sort of see everybody's sort of looking like, oh yeah, I've typed it in and it's ready to go. And the idea behind it is that it stops you, it stops people sort of necessarily picking up on other people's answers. It encourages everyone to think of their own answer, exactly what they want to say. So if you can answer this question here and you're ready to go, are people pretty much ready to go now? Can you show me thumbs or use your toolbar if you've got your camera? Yep, cap eye, so people are. So please press enter, go. And that's a technique called waterfall, and then sort of gives you a chance to see all the different things that people are finding about the good things about what they're doing with it. And I'm just quickly scanning it to give some feedback. And this is just a fairly easy example, but you can see this is another way of making this interactive and getting your people to interact, because you don't just want everyone sitting there, right? It's not a talking at session, it's just trying to get people to do this. And I can see a lot of people are really positive about using Zoom, and the people liking the breakout rooms, connecting. Yep, fantastic. Thank you for that. Okay, so interaction. What this slide here is, and which you're going to get later on to have a look through the link, is showing you that it's going to change, right? Whatever we're using now, you just think about 10 years ago, how much it's changed. We think this area is going to continue to change. We don't know exactly how. This is one link of the sort of things, whether you're going to be in sort of an immersive VR type environment. It's going to be super interesting to see. So, you know, watch the space. Really fascinating time. You got anything you want to add to that, Rachel?
Yeah, looking forward to what the future brings. Also afternoon what everybody has in their support for Zoom. We're lucky to use it through access through the VLN communities, but it's really important for us because we can really drill down into supporting our learners with it, because we have all sorts of dashboard functionality. And we have explored it quite a bit, and we will talk about other Zoom platforms like webinars and events before we leave. So
absolutely. And it keeps changing. There's new features. Even today I've updated it, and I see now that I can make a video and have a virtual background in it. So instead of leaving chats for colleagues, I'm going to be able to leave little videos, which will be really interesting and probably quicker. So our big hints to people, and this is prepared from some other resources we've sort of munged together, is you totally want to prepare stuff ahead of time. It's not just emergency response, what you're doing real time, right? This session has been prepared ahead. So to make something, you know, to make the best use of your participants' time, we recommend you prepare and practice ahead of time. So obviously with Zoom, you can practice your setting ahead and just make sure what all your settings are. Make sure what's changed. Even when you've been using it for the last 4 or 5 years, like some of us here, you know, today testing something ahead of time, I found a new feature in the polls that had just come in. So really worthwhile preparing ahead of time, and check your site settings, because your system admins might change them for whatever reasons, or sometimes Zoom unilaterally changes things, and just be aware of which things you can overwrite and when you kind of want to do them. So it's, you know, and always have a plan B, as I'm sure you know, with technology, and maybe a plan C. so I've a way where I can, share the slides or share a PDF or just figure out what you're going to do if it doesn't work for whatever reason. Over to you, kia ora, Rachel.
I have a t-shirt that says you're on mute. Go through, again, this is 101 stuff and things I'm sure you're aware of and got some stories to tell. But we really think that video enables that better social connection. You can really come eye to eye on a few things and get that social connection, which is what we talked about before around having presence. But there's a lot of tips here, and nobody wants to look like Jabba the Hutt or be embarrassed. There's nothing like sitting through a whole day PPTA meeting and have the national exec leader ask you if you had a good night last night because you have a row of empty wine bottles behind you. So you really do have to be mindful of it. And again, that's some of the structure we put into what we do. So here's some examples. We could just take a minute now because we've got plenty of time. If anybody has got an anecdote they would like to share, they can either pop it into the meeting chat, or they can pop their hand up and have a minute to tell us about some example of on-screen etiquette that you've observed that has been terrible, or good, or great. Haggis, Henderson, tell us about your experience.
Good, everybody. My problem is a wee bit different from everybody else's. Because I'm a baldy, I've got to make sure they haven't got too much lighting above me, otherwise people can't see anything with the light bouncing off my shiny bald head. I've got a wee spot, I bother with that now. So if I do the pommy hanky thing like that, you'll know what's going on.
Exactly. There's nothing like your students telling you how much you've aged since they last saw you, because the overhead light shows every wrinkle on your face. Yeah.
Mind you, for me, I was born a long time ago, and if you're born a long time ago, you've got a choice. Get old or get dead. So I'm quite happy to get old.
Yeah. Proud of that shiny spot.
Oh, yes, indeed. Right, that's me muting out now.
Kia ora. Does anyone else have any experience about what they think is good or maybe not so good on-screen etiquette? Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a picture there. Eating and drinking. I'm always having a cup of tea. And managing your sound is just as important as managing the video. Sure. We'll run through. Yeah, you really do have to be aware of what's happening in the house. Yeah. Fading into your virtual background, especially when you have, something to share on screen, you're putting something up to the screen, it just disappears. It can be quite spooky, actually. Yeah. There's nothing like being in a national meeting and having your husband come in and take his shirt off and ask you what's for dinner. Thankfully, they're all good friends at that meeting. Linda, you were probably at that meeting. Okay, kia ora, Lucy, can we progress the slides a little bit? Thanks. Yep, so having the your lighting right, ensuring that you don't have too much light behind you or above you. There's a little tip there in your Zoom settings. That's my Zoom setting. I have touched up my appearance just a little bit to smooth out some of the wrinkles, so you can touch up your appearance in my video. Zoom has yet to put your makeup on for you. I know that Messenger can, but I'm really looking forward to when Zoom puts your makeup on for you. So yes, lighting is very important. Thanks, Lucy. And positioning yourself on the screen. And again, it depends what situation you're in, how formal you want to be. I can't even see myself at the moment because I'm looking at all of you, but I'm semi-centered on the screen, perhaps not quite the right angle. Thanks to Lynn at Core Education, there was no point in us recreating some really great photos that she had already created. One of the things that I find difficult, but to try to do, is to actually just speak to the camera that's in front of you and not your notes or what's on the screen, so that you really feel like you're making eye contact with the people that are with you. Sometimes it's hard to judge because you're not at the other end. You know, you're doing your best guess. Kia ora, Lucy. And then this example of awareness is really important, and sometimes it's that slips a little bit if you're in a meeting for a long time, or you're getting distracted, or someone else is coming in to distract you. So although the virtual backgrounds can be a little bit distracting, if you've got something pretty simple, it can protect your privacy and distractions, ensuring that everybody in the house knows what you're up to. And I know with some of the staff that I work with, our pets are probably more distracting than anything else. So kick that snoring dog out of the room when you're hosting a webinar. Again, depending whether you're friends or, you know, with something that you want to have a little bit more formal. And those are all things to keep aware of. And you need to keep it up for the whole time. Over to you, Lucy.
So as well as managing yourself, which Rachel's just talked about, you also have got ways to manage the people that are joining your meeting. So what we recommend is that you may need to or wish to consider disabling participant annotation. We've certainly seen examples in COVID where people didn't do that and students didn't perhaps manage themselves as well as they could have. You may want to set it so that the host can be the only person that shares the screen. This is just sort of making sure that, you know, I mean, I know teachers are pretty good and I don't expect this with colleagues, but it's the sort of thing that I consider in a Zoom setting. You can use, and just a wee reminder that you can use your participant settings to, you know, mute, to disable people's camera or remove people if you need. And just sort of consider, you might want to put focus mode onto you, or you might want to get your participants to pin a particular screen. So just being aware that you've got those options. And similarly, being aware of your security settings. You know, do you need to password your meetings? Do you want a waiting room? Maybe your users are logged in. There was a lot of publicity back in the, you know, sort of lockdown times where this was happening in schools and things. And we just, I guess, as organisations, we amped up our security a bit, and we were very aware that, you know, any of our teachers, if they need to, can mute or remove participants or lock the meeting or stop people screen sharing, etc. So as well as your settings that you've got to set up ahead of time, during the session, if you need to, you can go, as the host, you can go into the security and do this. And I saw lots of you use Zoom, so probably you are all pretty familiar with this. But things to think of. So interaction, trying to make it really interactive. You know, just always, I mean, you can see my primary background. I'm trying to get people to give me thumbs up, you know, or whatever. Can you see this? Do this or that. You know, give me a wave if you can hear this, etc. So you want to think how you're going to make yours interactive for your audience. And we really recommend varying the things. So don't just keep repeating the same old thing. And I'm going to show you a couple of other ways. So you notice in here already, every so often we've been trying to have it interactive. You know, it's been in the chat, it's been a chance to talk in the audio, it's been a chance to do a poll. And you're coming up here, you're thinking about your specific questions and your really structured conversations, and just remembering to wait. You know, oh, it's exciting, I'm online, but hey, I'm just going to pause and reflect and wait. And in your sessions, you know, whose voice is missing? You know, is it just a few people contributing? As an online teacher, I will often have a little checklist just beside me, and I'm just sort of noting who I've heard from, just to make sure that I'm picking up not just the people that have, you know, they're confident to speak first and whatever, but the ones that maybe need a bit of reflect time, and how I can get them to contribute and bring in their contribution. And that comes back to, you know, having multiple channels as well. You know, there's the audio, there's the send me a note in the chat, there's later on, there's going to be a couple of other channels and ways that you can contribute, because, you know, the strength of a team is in its diversity. And so if you're not hearing from all of your team, you're losing potentially valuable input. So Rachel, were you
I was just going to say, again, it's very context dependent on who you're working with at the time.
Totally.
And we'll dip into that a little bit deeper in a bit.
Absolutely. So you know your group and what will work, but these are some of the generic suggestions that we have. So planning ahead. So sitting down ahead of sessions and thinking out, how am I going to get people to interact and how am I going to get them to collaborate? And, you know, how will they ask questions? So we've used already audio chat. We've had a poll. Haven't given you a quiz, but a quiz can be a really good way if you need to get more detailed things. And poll must be really important because we've got that in. And Mentimeter as a tool. Have anybody used that one? Mentimeter? I see a couple of nods. If you haven't, well worth checking out afterwards. It lets your people type in text, so they can type in phrases, and then it hauls out which ones were showed the most, and it brings up like a diagram that shows which phrases were used and most commonly. It can be a really useful way to real time get information from people. And then thinking about what ways they might do. So we might have breakout rooms. Padlet, have people used Padlet? Yeah, I see some notes. It's basically post-it notes. So this is like a little Padlet sheet and they put electronic post-it notes and they contribute and you can move them around. And it can be a great way to collaborate, to group ideas and just to capture things as well. So, and you can create mind maps and there's a ton of tools for those as well. So I know there's heaps of tools. I've just picked out a couple of our favorite ones. So if you want to save yourself some time, these are some really good ones to start with. These are ones I recommend. And I saw some people nodding with those. Please feel free to add into the chat if you've got any other favorite tools. You know, what's your go-to interactive thing that I haven't said that you'd recommend? I'd love to hear. And I'm going to give you two options here, chat or audio. You're most welcome, whichever one.
Jamboards is coming up as a go-to.
What was that? Sorry, Rachel?
Jamboards is coming up as a go-to.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I like Jamboards. And Mural. And you see, this is what I love about something like this is I have not actually used Mural. So now I'm writing this down to go and check it out later. Ah, yeah. Miro. Yes, I rather like Miro as well. Takes a little bit in Coggle. Yeah. Miro does all these little mind maps, which is cool, especially for making connections. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Good ideas. And see, this again illustrates the whole thing. This is why you work in a group, because the group has got better ideas than one person or two people. You know, I'm getting ideas from you. And so I thank you for sharing those. And together we've got a lot of good ideas. So something else we recommend that you do for your participants is consider their accessibility of things. And closed captioning and live transcription are other ways to make this just that more available for people that might not have access to it otherwise. In the past 2 years, I have seen the AI technology that does the captions as you speak go in leaps and bounds. It's light years better than it used to. It now copes fairly well with our fast, comparatively fast Kiwi speech. You used to have to really slow it down for it to pick it up. It still mangles te reo, and every chance I get to give them feedback, I suggest that. But I realise that, you know, obviously there's lots of things happening, but I think it will continue to improve. And I think this is a good way to make it more accessible for other people. And in the slides, when you get them later, there is a very detailed resource about universal design for learning, especially for the online environment. So we haven't reinvented the wheel for this, but I will just show you. It's got what, why, and how, and it's just got a wealth of information. So I won't take you through it right now, but I do recommend later that you go through it and have a look-see. You know, UDL is such a useful concept for planning from a number of different angles. The link for this, I can put it into the chat now. We are going to share the slides now, but I will just pop the link in here for people that want to look at it right now. There you go. And yeah, we haven't reinvented the wheel, like I say, but we thought this was a really great resource and we recommend it to you all for your planning. And the very next thing that we're going to do is another form of interactivity. Over to you, Rachel.
Yep. So before we go dig deeper into some of the strategies that have worked for us in our PLD sessions, we're going to just give you guys some time to talk to each other. Just looking at our time span, I think we had 45 minutes, but I can see we will probably be going over. So we'll keep it a short 5-minute session where we've got 2 questions there, and we've got a link to a shared document, which Lucy, can you pop that into the chat, please? Sorry. And we're going to randomly sort you into breakout rooms to have a conversation about what are some strategies that have worked for you in the past, either as a participant or a facilitator. What is something that you've heard of, whether it's something we've talked about here today or other things that you've heard of that you would like to try? Are you back with us, Lucy?
I am.
Yeah. We had a great conversation in our room, and I'm expecting that all you guys did as well.
Absolutely. I popped into a couple of rooms and some really good ideas in there, and new ideas, as there always are in these things. So
yeah, I think we've tried to put a lot into a short period of time. We could have probably run a series with this, with enough time for breakouts and conversations along the way. But Lucy, I'm mindful of time. We've really just got a few minutes left, or we're just going to have to flip through what we've got at the end.
Okay.
Shall I just do
Who would you like me to jump to?
Just a quick review, and then I'll let from here, and I'll just quickly review.
Okay, so sharing the slides again?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So I'll just speak through just quickly what we had left to share, and many of you may have been in the experience above, which is my preferred experience, and the experience below, which can be a very scary nightmare. So how you plan for this all depends on your context. Thanks, Lucy. And I said this is my preferred means of facilitation and working with teachers as well. So, and this is what I think we all experience in the breakout room. So ways to facilitate online that builds that community of practice that you're working with. Thanks, Lucy. And this is an example of a couple of strategies that work really well with our group of teachers. So again, we used the slides, but we structured them around reflective questions. We align them to themes, and our teachers worked asynchronously. I mean, they did their mahi and they did their preparation before we actually got into a webinar room. They were working through these slides, and when we came to the room, they'd all had something to share beforehand, and then we got into little breakout groups and we looked at our commonalities, and we and put together a resource based on the teacher's reflections. So that's one example. Just different ways you can work, and it doesn't just have to be in this space. You can use your collaborative documents. You can take time before and after, all part of the same PLD experience rather than a single event. Thanks, Lucy. Same with perhaps some reflective discussions and professional readings. We use a collaborative docs, and then we take those discussions into our online face-to-face Zoom meetings. So having people share, pick out some points and pointers for discussion, and then being able to come together and really get down to the nitty-gritty, because a lot of stuff has already been shared ahead of time, and that's an example of one of those PLD sessions. So that's a couple of examples of things that have worked with us in our close and small group facilitation. Lucy, you'll give us a few tips about when you're working with the masses, which sometimes happens.
Absolutely. So just consider carefully what you're going to use, whether you're going to use a meeting like this or a webinar where you're not necessarily seeing everybody's faces at the same time and you can't easily speak to them, or a Zoom event. And we haven't used a lot of Zoom events, but what I have seen of them, Some of the quite cool things are the ability to almost look in the virtual door. So have a look in and see what's going on in the session without actually sort of necessarily stepping inside. We recommend having multiple roles. So even in this, you saw a little bit of that somebody's hosting, someone else is keeping an eye on the chat. You might assign someone just to the support. You might have people that pop into the breakout rooms. It becomes very important to use spotlighting and pinning, and we recommend a waiting room. You don't want your session sort of hijacked by somebody that's got something noisy happening in their background, or they aren't managing their cell phone or whatever. And it takes your questions pretty much down to text chat. And a small tip is that if you get your co-hosts to put an asterisk in front of their name, then it will put them right at the top of your list of participants, which makes it easy if you're going to get them to join in. So
Hi, Lucy, we've got a question.
Yes.
Yes, we've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, Mike is asking the difference between meeting, webinar and Zoom, and very specifics about spotlighting.
Okay.
Using language that I've got no idea what it means. I'm sure there are others in the same boat.
Thank you for checking in. We're in a Zoom meeting right now. Zoom have another thing that you can get called webinars. It costs more, so your organisation might not have it, but it is a way to let a huge number of people join. And it's a bit like a meeting on steroids. So I sort of glossed over it at the start when I said when you were in a webinar, you didn't necessarily see all your participants' faces. You were showing you, and you can see their chat, and it's Zoom has got some quite detailed information about it. I'm really just signaling, hey, there are these things, and recommending going off and having a little look into it if you've got the wherewithal. I don't know what numbers you're dealing with, but if you're dealing with big numbers, it could be worth looking into. And the second question was to do with...
Yeah, the event was more for if you were having conference and multiple activities happening at the same time.
Yeah, and I think quite an expensive thing too, as educators. And the second question in the chat was, let's just...
Spotlighting. What is spotlighting and pinning? That goes back to managing our participants, doesn't it?
Spotlighting is something the host can do. It's where I could set it so that instead of seeing all of the participants there, it might be that you could just see the person that was speaking. So it's a setting that the host can do. Pinning is something that the participants can do. So I'm just an ordinary participant in an evening class that I take, and it's something where it involves moving, and I want to see what the host is doing, and so I will pin their one to make their screen bigger so that I can see whatever we're doing in the particular class. So and just a Pilates thing, and I need to see it. I'm not particularly good yet.
Yeah. If you mouse over someone's picture, it's got 3 little dots, and the 3 little dots give you the choices to do things like pin.
Yeah, so at the moment you could mouse over the 3 dots by Rachel, and you could pin it so that you just saw her one if you needed to.
Not that you want to, but carry on.
Yeah. So these are all fairly new things in Zoom, so we were just highlighting them as options. Great question, thank you.
Yeah, this is a follow-up, and there were some questions before we came into this on your registrations about what to do around recordings. So things we really need to be mindful are about sharing, and it depends, who's doing the facilitation, how are you going to share, what are you going to share, and who are you going to share with, so what's appropriate. So there might be some, again, goes back to the context, there might be parts of a small professional group meeting that it's worth recording because it's actually a valuable snippet, but there's other parts like our breakouts you would not put into a shared session. So when someone says, I can't be there, can you record it? It's not always appropriate to do that. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's appropriate to share with just those people who were there, so they've got a bit of rewindable learning and they can revisit stuff. And sometimes there's some really valuable stuff where people don't mind, they're okay to share. It can go up there into your more open sharing spaces. If you're bringing in external facilitators, it's something you need to discuss with them. They'll have their own policy about things and their own access to their intellectual property, their IP. So there are some things to be really mindful about when sharing. There'll be different levels of sharing depending on the circumstances. Thanks, Lucy. And we use Vimeo. You could use YouTube. We've got a pro version of this. We just find it really useful to be able to be honest, can't remember why we chose it against other things, but it was the best choice for us at the time. Just depending on what you require, on which works best for you. We do have a process, whether it was YouTube or video, we will always download off the Zoom server. It costs money to, it's much more expensive on the Zoom server to keep any recordings up there. We just save the base recordings in our drive, so it's archived there, and then we take what we want, the parts of it, and we put it in online space. We wanted to have as less work as possible when it comes to any editing, so we're really try to be as careful as we can when we're working to stop and start our recordings where we want them to be, rather than having to go and edit beginnings and ends.
And we have tried to squeeze lots into this, and I did say questions at the end. I wonder if we should open this to questions as we're going through as well. What do you reckon?
Yeah, we've got one more slide to go. I don't even know what time it is. Yep, so yep. Yeah, the last slide is about giving feedback, and I will pop this into our feedback into the chat so that when you leave here.
So please, can you complete this? It's a really quick form, and this helps us, just show that people have come along and if they've found it helpful and whatever. So we really appreciate if you're able to just go through. It's got about 4 questions, and I think 4, and they're really quick ones. So we value that. Rachel's just popping that into the chat now for you. And
Lucy Lee's got a question there for you. She's just put her hand up.
Fantastic.
Sorry, that was by accident. I just must have been hovering over there. But yeah, no, thank you very much. It's been really interesting. Like a lot of it is consolidating, but there's some new features in there that I want to explore as well.
Fantastic. Goodbye. Thank you. Kia ora. This is a chance to jump in and ask any questions that you want. And I am going to stop the recording because I have sometimes found that people ask more questions once the recording is stopped as well. So just bringing up my Zoom bar, which has just changed my settings. Interesting.
So we're really concluding with that as the final part, is that follow-up is as important as planning and participation during your sessions, sharing what works for us, asking you to give us feedback at the same time, and giving you that time to ask any final questions before we go into our closing karakia. And know that you can get in contact with us as well too.
I was just going to add, Rachel, always grab one of us or someone that, if you want to do a practice session. Really good to get feedback. I don't necessarily mean you have to record yourself in a session, but to give yourself confidence if you haven't done much of this sort of we call it teaching, but for PLD for you, actually just grabbing one of us and saying, have you got half an hour to just go through a few of these things, because we've thrown quite